Welcome back to my channel IMDb Recap. Today I'm going to explain an American drama film called The Banker, released in the year 2020. The movie is about two African American entrepreneurs who hire a working-class white man to pretend to be the head of their business empire while they themselves pose as a janitor and chauffeur. But before we begin, please subscribe to our channel and beware of the spoilers. In 1965, in Washington, D.C., Bernard is summoned to a court hearing to testify about federally insured banks and the laws governing the ownership of these banks. Bernard is prepared to fight the case as he believes the court wants to set an example out of him. Story goes back in time and rewinds to the year 1939 in a place called Willis, Texas. Bernard, one of the protagonists of the movie, is seen listening to a white man's conversation, while he polishes the man's shoes, and takes notes of the man's words after he leaves. He also tries to learn about real estate from an agent by spying on him, but he almost gets caught. At home, Bernard's father finds his notes, and although he is impressed by Bernard's learning ability, he scolds him for spying on the white folks. His father believes a man of color cannot get into real estate to earn money, as the white people will certainly not allow him, but Bernard believes otherwise and says that one day he will prove his father wrong and will make money from the real estate. Scene changes and we see that 15 years, in 1954, Bernard moves to Los Angeles, California with his wife, Eunice, and his son. They have dinner with Eunice's uncle, Deacon, who tells Bernard that the aircraft companies are hiring people of color, indirectly referencing him, but Bernard informs him that he wants to explore the world of real estate. Deacon mocks him and asks him how is he going to pay the rent without having a job, but Bernard assures him that he will always pay his rent on time, and he leaves. Soon after, Deacon speaks with his wife Eunice to convince Bernard, but she tells him that Bernard is a genius and she will support him by getting a job, till he finds a property that he can afford. Bernard promises to make it big and to get his family out of shackles of poverty. The next day, Bernard gives his cousin, Tony, a ride to work, and there he meets Matt, Tony's friend. Not long after, Bernard searches for a building to buy, however the purchasing prices is way too high. Bernard finally finds a building he can afford, but then there will be no money left to get the building fixed. Eunice gives a suggestion to Bernhard too. He gets another investor who has similar goals. Later at night, Eunice introduces Bernard to Joe, who happens to be a wealthy club owner, in hopes of making Joe his partner, but Bernard refuses to make Joe his business partner. Eunice tells him that he is wrong about Joe, as Joe is an influential man. However, Bernard insists, and Eunice tells him to ask Barker to reduce his selling price. Bernard meets with Barker to reduce the selling price, but Barker refuses his offer. He also denies Bernard's request for a loan. Bernard finds out that Mr. Reed happens to be owner of the bank and decides to meet him, but he is not allowed inside due to his skin color. Bernard then decides to wait outside Reed's office and finally gets to meet him. However, Reed refuses to grant Bernard loan. Later at night, we see Barker calling Bernard and decides to help him get the loan from the bank by acting as his co-signee. Bernard and Eunice go to Joe's club to celebrate his success. While Eunice talks with her friends, Joe approaches Bernard and asks if they can talk outside. Joe tells him that he likes to see black men succeed and he wants to invest in Bernard's business. However, Joe asks if Bernard trusts Barker and he nods in a yes. Thereafter, we see Bernard and Tony renovating the house. A woman, Ms. Cooper, approaches them and informs them that they cannot own the building as used to be a white man's house. They don't think about it too much. Tony invites Matt to come work for them and the trio renovates the house. Ms. Cooper decides to call the cops on Bernard as she does not want him in the building. However, he shows the officers the paperwork of the building and they leave him alone. Bernard leases all the apartments and this impresses Barker. Barker offers him a partnership in an apartment, but Barker tells him that he will be the face to sign the deal while Bernard works with the investors. Bernard agrees and they become partners, while Matt and Tony continue helping Bernard with the renovations. Bernard takes Eunice to a building, and she is happy when she finds out they own that place. At Barker's house, Ms. Barker goes to wake him but finds out that he is dead. After Barker's death, Ms. Barker offers Bernard a buyout for all his interest in Barker/Garrett properties, as she doesn't want to do business with a black man. Bernard refuses the offer as it does not commensurate with what he owns. Ms. Barker threatens him to accept the offer because his name does not appear on the legal paperwork, and he will be left with nothing. The lawyer tells him that he can prove Barker's intention if he finds another witness and lawyer aside from him and Reed, because Reed is Barker's banker. Later, Bernard visits Reed's office, but the secretary tells him that Mr. Reed refuses to see him, leaving Bernard no choice but to ask Joe for help. Joe tells him that his mother was a real estate agent, and he owns 18 buildings, including the club. Bernard shows him a picture of the banker's headquarters and tells him that he wants them to buy it, but Joe doubts the idea. He manages to convince Joe and says that if they buy the building, they will have access to 12 banks and none of them will refuse to loan them money. Joe asks him how he will be able to own real estate and buy the banker's building in a neighborhood full of white people. Thinking of a solution, Bernard and Joe convince Matt to be the face of the business. They will teach him everything he needs to know about real estate, although Joe believes he won't last long. Joe says Bernard is too good but thinks he will change when he gets rich. Matt agrees to work with them after his encounter with Susie, his high school junior. Joe tells Matt that he has 1 month to learn how to play golf, as most of the white people play golf and he needs to learn it in order to get included in their circle and get accepted. Bernard and Joe teach Matt everything he needs to know about real estate, including how to play golf and negotiating deal with white men. Eunice also teaches him eating etiquettes and table manners. Matt is ready to be the face of the business and Bernard briefs him about the banker's building, owned by Charles Renault. Joe tells Matt that Charles would not take him seriously without a proper introduction and he has arranged for him to bump into Charles at the Hancock Park Country Club. Joe poses as Matt's chauffeur and drives him to the club. Matt is worried but Joe encourages him and tells him that he is a natural performer and not to worry about what's about to follow. Matt meets Charles and plays golf with him. After playing golf, Matt and Charles meet again and they talk about the building and try to negotiate a selling price. Charles is surprised about how Matt does the calculation in his head, although all that Matt had done was to memorize all the numbers that were given to him. The meeting goes through without a problem and Matt ends up buying the property. The group celebrates their success and plans to introduce themselves as Matt's partner the next day. They renovate the office and moves in while Mr. Reed is surprised to see Bernard as one of the owners. Bernard continues to buy buildings and lease them while Matt marries Susie. Eventually, they become successful and own dozens of properties in Los Angeles. Bernard and Eunice return to Willis, Texas in 1963, to visit Bernard's father. They have dinner and his father admits that he was right about making it big in real estate. His father tells him that he is proud of his son and gets all emotional. The next day, Bernard decides to take a walk around town and Eunice tells him to take their son with him. After a long walk, Bernard tells Junior that things are different there and apologizes for making him see them. Bernard suggests that they own a bank in Texas, although Joe thinks that they have no idea how to run a bank. Bernard tells him that Matt will run the front just like he did in the real estate business, but Joe disagrees. Joe tells him that if they go down to Texas, they are going to lose all their money and tells him not to make it personal and to think straight. Although Joe believes it is a bad idea, he eventually decides to be Bernard's partner. Matt, being the face of the bank business, buys the bank from Robert Florence and tells him that Bernard and Joe are his financial partners in Los Angeles, but the bank does not realize at that moment that they are black. The bank now gives loans to the black, giving them an opportunity to grow their business. Robert Jr. confronts Matt for approving loans that aren't from him and becomes suspicious of the people he gives the loans to. Robert later discovers that the loaners are black people and watches Matt's movement. Susie tells Matt that she hates it in Texas and wonders why has he not become a partner yet. Robert finds out that Bernard and Joe are black and follows Matt to his apartment. Robert threatens them that he could tell everyone that the bank is owned by them and that they also give loans to black people. However, Joe tells him that their names are on the contract he signed, and his father knows about their identity. Robert tells them about an anonymous report that they are making unsafe loans and there will be an inspection that's scheduled next month. Bernard thinks that they should pause all loans to the blacks until after the inspection. Matt proposes that they buy another bank, the Bank of Marlin, and as the president of both banks, he will move the blacks from the mainland bank to the Bank of Marlin before the mainland is inspected. Bernard thinks that it's not the right time to own another bank, considering the situation they all are in. Matt suggests that they make him really run the bank, but Bernard opposes his idea and Matt tells them that he will resign and go back to Los Angeles. Bernard and Joe agree with Matt and buy the bank for him and make Eunice his maid to supervise his work. Matt tells her that he just wants to show some respect for all that he has done for the business, but Eunice reminds him that he still doesn't know how to properly run a bank and have had no experience in this finance domain. Susie visits Matt in his office and tries to create conflicts in his mind against Bernard and Joe. She tells him that they should be lucky to have him and that they aren't smarter than him. While they talk, Matt receives a call from Robert. He tells him that 4 white people want to withdraw their money because the bank is owned by black people. A federal bank examiner visits the Marlin Bank and asks Matt to prepare the master book in an hour. Matt calls Bernard to inform him, forcing him to dress like a cleaner after Eunice convinces him to be at Matt's side. The examiner returns and Bernard helps Matt with the replies while he poses as if he was cleaning the door. The examiner suspects Bernard, prompting him to leave, and tells Joe that Matt is in trouble. Matt meets with Bernard in the restroom and asks him for help. The examiner rejects most of the bank's loans and Matt returns to the restroom for help. Bernard discovers some of the loans are against the bank's policy and wonders how it would have gotten approved, since he checked it all himself. It turns out that Matt didn't use their lawyer and asks Robert to help him look for a new lawyer. However, Robert used this opportunity to switch the mortgage to ruin the Marlin Bank. Bernard blames himself as everyone warned him against the idea, but he did not listen. Bernard and Joe tell Matt to forget about Marlin and focus on mainland, even though Matt thinks they can sue Robert and the lawyer for their misdemeanors. Joe and Bernard find out that Matt made mainland pay face value for the loans of Marlin Bank that the examiner asks him to mark down at Marlin, which is basically fraud. They confront Matt and he tells them that it is temporary. Bernard warns Matt that his mistakes will end up sinking both banks. While they talk, the deputy comptroller of the currency for the Southern District walks in and tells them that the Treasury Department has revoked Mainland's license and that Matt has been fired. While Matt tries to apologize to them, the FBI arrives and arrests Bernard and Joe. Bernard tries to fight, but he is apprehended. Bernard and Joe have all charges against them dropped, except the federal charges, and they decide to have a court hearing. Matt, on the other hand, accepts immunity for lying about the real owners of the banks and illegally transferring loans between the two banks at the expense of Joe and Bernard. In court, Matt did as he was told, and lied against Bernard and Joe. Bernard goes through his notes and meets with John, who tells him to take the immunity deal or he may run the risk of going to jail. The next day, Bernard meets Joe and they share an emotional moment before the hearing begins. During Bernard's statements, he speaks passionately about the blacks not having equal opportunity as the whites, risking his immunity. Bernard and Joe are convicted and the government seizes their properties after the hearing, and Robert buys the Mainland Bank. Years later, Bernard and Joe are released after serving jail time and they tell Eunice that the government did not know about the buildings they bought in the Bahamas. Matt actually called Bernard a night before he testified. He tells Bernard that he will be charged with 50 years if he doesn't take the immunity. Bernard advises him to take it and asks him to buy the buildings before the government takes all their money. Eunice kisses Bernard and the three leave for the Bahamas. Overall, Banker is a great movie to watch with an amazing storyline, so make sure to check it out. To watch many more exciting recaps like this, don't forget to subscribe and like this video. Let us know in the comments section about the next favorite movie that you would like us to recap. Thanks again for watching and stay safe and healthy.